my former colleagues and the new city council members. I have to remember I'm not on city council anymore now. But I want to especially acknowledge Natalie Archibald for her leadership. And I'm sorry, I'm going to stand up. I hope you all can hear me if I stand. In carrying this legislation was so incredibly important and such a very new conversation in so many ways in the city of Atlanta, but not new in other ways. Kwanzaa Hall, I'm so glad he can be here today. Kwanzaa really began to stir up our conscience as it relates to meaningful criminal justice reform in the city of Atlanta. And I'm just grateful to you. I know I speak for all of the elected officials here when I say there's so many things that are important to our communities that we just don't know what we don't know. And I know I speak for myself and members of City Council when I say that the intentions are there. We want to do right by our communities, but sometimes we need the help and really the guidance and leadership of our communities to show us the way to get it right. And so, Kwanzaa, I want to just thank you for being that voice and for also bringing that top of mind for all of us in the city of Atlanta, how very important criminal justice reform is. I also have to thank my former law professor, Burl Ellis, for being here today. Best law professor I ever had.
Oh, my.
And I honestly mean that. I remember we were studying to take the bar, and at that time you could take the bar your third year of law school. And it was in February, and there were some classmates who were not supportive of us missing class to study for the bar. And I remember you were so deeply offended by that. And I remember it because you talked about the need for us to work together and for there to be give and take. And so I think it's so appropriate that you are here today because this really has been about give and take. And my brother from another mother, Molly Davis, thank you. Thank you, thank you. We've known each other for a very long time. I had the pleasure of going to college with his beautiful wife. But during the course of the campaign, it was not an easy ask for anyone's support because what was top of mind for Molly was that we do right by the community. And there were certain things that were a priority, including meaningful criminal justice reform in the city of Atlanta. And I remember when we first discussed cash bail bonds, I could not make a commitment because I was not informed. And I said to you, let me do some research and I'll get back with you. And thanks to your leadership and your guidance and with all of the others who've been working on the progressive agenda and really pouring in additional information, we stand here today. And this is making a difference in the city of Atlanta. And this is so important because a lot of times when people think about criminal justice reform, they think about it as it relates just to people who matter to them. And I know so many of us know someone, maybe a family member who's been incarcerated. But think about it in terms of your contacts each and every day. When you are talking about poor people who are being unfairly incarcerated, it may not be your brother, but it may be your barber's brother. It may not be your mother, but it's probably the mother of the woman who is serving food in the cafeteria. It may be your teacher's son. It may be anyone in our community who's living and walking in the margins. And so this is important to all of us. It's important to our communities. It's especially important to our families because we are giving men and women an opportunity to be held accountable, but also to continue with their lives and not be penalized simply because they are poor. And I just have to recognize Reverend Warnock, who is here. Thank you for your leadership as well. Andrea Young, and I know there's so many other names that I can call. I see that Royce Brooks is here. our Chief Equity Officer, and I want to also acknowledge Rashad Taylor, who could not be here this morning. I hope I haven't left anyone out. I see Chief Labat is here. But thank you all, and thank you for being here. So with that, I am going to sign this legislation. And it is now official. Thank you. With that, I will take any questions that you all may have.
Can you talk about what will be in place to track the folks who sign themselves out and make sure that they come back to their court date?
There will continue to be a process in place, Morris, as it relates to holding people accountable. We still have the failure to appear mechanism in place. That will not change. Corrections, and this really will be about collaboration with all of our stakeholders, including our municipal court judges and also our corrections department, to make sure that this legislation really does what we intend it to do. It's not to give people a free pass. It's not to excuse people from returning to court. It is simply to say and to make sure that we have on the books a law that says you will not be held in jail unfairly simply because you don't have money to get out of jail. But all of the other requirements as it relates to FTAs, if you have a probation hold, et cetera, those things will remain in place. And if you fail to appear in court as scheduled, then you certainly can be held at that time. But that's a different set of circumstances than someone who, say, is picked up for jaywalking.
What are some of the stories that you've heard of people who have been locked up for minor offenses that really moved you to make this change?
Too many to name. When you hear people who are staying in jail for 2 months, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, simply because they can't afford to get out, and they haven't had an opportunity to see a judge. There was a story that I saw yesterday on a pregnant woman who was incarcerated. I mean, there have been numerous stories, and it really is this recurring theme that these are poor people who just don't have the resources to get out of jail, who otherwise, if it were me or probably anyone in this room, you could pay $200 or $500 and get out. And that really is inexcusable, especially in the city of Atlanta. And it, again, it hits especially close for home for me, as someone who's represented many criminal defendants, but also someone who's had family members and friends who've been incarcerated. But for the grace of God, you can have someone who, for a minor offense, stays in jail, and then it creates this cycle. Then you lose your job, and then you have these extensive fees, and you can never seem to catch up and get ahead. And it really is a recipe for disaster, not to mention our costs on our correction system. That you are holding people on a $500 fine, and you may incur $5,000 or more in costs to hold them.
The courts are redoing their schedule, and they implied that they won't be doing any of the new policy until they get that done. Have you spoken with them about this? Because they've been working on this for some time.
I know that our city attorney, Jeremy Berry, and thank you for your leadership, Jeremy, and also to your entire team on leading this. We've had conversations with the courts because it will take a combination of stakeholder involvement and making sure that we are all on the same page. And I am very hopeful that we have it right this time, but certainly this is a completely new process and something new that we're doing in the city of Atlanta. So it may, hopefully won't take long to work out the kinks, but all of our stakeholders, our corrections department, our judges, along with our legal department, our city solicitor, and our public defender have been a part of the conversation.
Is Atlanta leading in this, or is this modeled on another city, and what experience did those other cities have?
There are many other cities who've already done this. New Orleans has done it. Washington, D.C. has done it. There have been several states who've looked at it and who've also implemented it. And you are also seeing a federal discussion led by Senator Kamala Harris and Senator Paul on making sure that there's meaningful reform at the federal level. And it was really important that Atlanta not be on the wrong side of history with this. It's happening across the country, and it really, I think, speaks to the realization that mass incarceration is not the way that we reduce crime.
That's right.
The other layer of this is that we have to continue to work with our service providers to make sure that as we have people who are coming in contact with the criminal justice system, that we're breaking these cycles. And I know Chief Labat, along with corrections, we talked about a lot of programs as it relates to GED programs, job training, social services, et cetera. And a charge that I even gave my team last week when we were talking about this is, what is it that we can do with this physical place and space in this jail to make it truly a transformative place for criminal justice reform? So stay tuned for that, Chief Labat. We're going to send some people over to take a look at that space. But, you know, it's about more than mass incarceration.
Mayor Bottoms, I'm wondering, Eric, are you going to be allocating any more extra money to the public defender's office to deal with people who are homeless and dealing with addiction?
I know that we have several programs in place as it relates to social services, especially as it relates to addiction. I don't know what this year's budget looks like, but I know that it would be ripe for conversation because I've said many times we either pay on the front end or we pay on the back end. And I think that our dollars are better spent paying on the front end to provide services than they are to provide incarceration.
Let me ask another question then. Can you tell me about the economic impact for the Super Bowl that's coming up?
For the Super Bowl?
Yes.
Wow, so Minnesota was really cold. I'm not built for this. You know, that's been a part of our conversation, and it was interesting meeting with the mayor there. They really took a different approach as it relates to how they engaged with the Super Bowl committee and the NFL committee to make sure that the city was not on the hook, and it's certainly something that we will be looking at in the city of Atlanta. But anytime you have, whether it's a Super Bowl or any mega event, and you have thousands upon thousands of people converging on your city, there will be a boost to the economy of that city. The balance to that, of course, is that you have to provide services. You have to provide law enforcement services, et cetera, and that was part of the reason that we sent a team to have those conversations so we really could get a download in real time on what they felt they had done right and what they perhaps would do differently. It was very helpful, but I don't know of a city who said that they've gone broke after hosting the Super Bowl, so we don't anticipate that, and I think that it is going to be a tremendous boost to our city as a whole. And the resounding thing was make every day count, that the countdown really is on. So we have a lot of work to do, but we'll be ready.
So how will the Super Bowl here in Atlanta be different from all of the previous Super Bowls?
It's going to be the best one yet. That's my answer.
Will you have any pull to the halftime performer next year?
You know, I've gotten several text messages already about recommendations about halftime performances. So I have no idea how that works. I'm putting it on the list of things to figure out, but I know that we will have a lot of talent to choose from here.
A lot of local people.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you all. Here.
Yes.
I'm not going to hold that against you.
Yeah,